Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Will with Schedulefly, and I'm excited today to have Tyler Carlson on the phone. Tyler is co-owner of TyMark Hospitality up in Rhode Island, and if you listen to the podcast, just recently we had his partner Mark Lays on here, and these guys have got 4 awesome restaurants. They're doing really good work there. They work hard, and they have a great group, and they have a busy schedule. So, Tyler, thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Okay, so I'll start where I start every one of these, which is tell me when and why you got into hospitality in the first place.
Well, I started in hospitality when I was a teenager, which I think is a story for a lot of people. And, I enjoyed it, but it was really just a way that I made money. And then as I got out of college, I had a sales job, and I went to Babson, which is a business school up in Boston. And, I kind of changed direction after I got out of school. I was a sales manager in a suit and tie, and I just didn't really like the people I was working for and what was going on. So I ended up coming back to restaurants, and I was actually signed up to take a Series 7 and trade securities, and I just didn't really care about that. And I got a job to try to get a job as a bartender at a new hotel that had just opened up in the area. And when I showed them my resume and talked to the boss a little bit, they said, "Listen, you're going to have to not be a bartender. We want you to be some kind of floor manager." And that's how I kind of got going again. I was 23 at the time, and I realized that there really wasn't a limit on where I could go with that. And Mark, who you referenced before, is my best buddy, and he's also my business partner. And he and I have been talking about going into business together since we were teenagers. So long story short, I ended up being the food and beverage director of the hotel for a few years, which was very valuable experience and certainly something I use a lot of now. But I knew that I wanted to control my own destiny a little more than I could there. So I made a move and came out to Wesley and got involved with Mark and partnered up, and the group has grown a lot from there. So I guess to answer your question, I started when I was 14 or 15 years old, but I didn't really make a career path for myself completely until I was probably in my early mid-20s.
Early to mid-20s. It's interesting, man, because you were going to go take the Series 7, and here you are. I mean, that would have been just a massively different career trajectory. But,
yes.
I tip my hat because I think you had the self-awareness and wisdom early on to realize that wasn't something that you wanted to do. But I think a lot of folks, they get caught up in that path where they're seeing you probably have buddies that were doing that. It's kind of like what you think you're supposed to do. And then people wind up, like you and I, halfway through their, 10, 15 years later or whatever out of college, and they're doing something that they thought they were supposed to do, but they're not really happy, but they're kind of stuck. And it's hard to unwind from that. So I commend you for realizing that early on. I think because it's what you did is it set you up for probably a career that you'll have, for the rest of your life, doing something you really enjoy, which is great.
I hope so. I appreciate that, Will. And I think that a lot of people, I think it is common that people have to change direction, but I think it's getting harder. And, I think younger generations, I'm 32, so I'm a millennial by definition. And I think my generation and younger people, we're having harder times. A lot of them are having harder times with the transition because, like you said, you have to have enough self-awareness to figure out your path, but I think a lot of people in their 20s naturally don't quite know it yet.
That's right.
I grew up in Connecticut, and I grew up in an environment where I came from a good family, and I went to private school and played lacrosse, and I had a lot of kind of conventional check boxes for what defined being successful. And so part of that was going to a high-powered business school and wearing a suit and tie afterwards. Trading securities sure sounds good and looks good on a business card. And, I think that was definitely tied into it for me. But the reality I came to is, I like restaurants, but I really like is people. And I think that I'm good at people when it comes to both customer interactions and working with staff. That's the stuff I really like. To do my job, I had to spend time cooking on a saute line. And, when we open businesses, I've worked 100-hour weeks and put my personal life and my other things that are important to me in jeopardy, or at least stress them. It's asked a lot out of me, but I think that whole saying about, you just do something that you love and the success and the money come, I think that's kind of true. I think you have to have a path, but it has to combine with discipline and relentless work to really make things go. And I guess for me, in terms of career path, I like being around. I like that environment. I like the excitement of it's really busy. We are borderline understaffed, and we need to really make things go now. That's kind of how it started for me, because I like that. The people that I was working around responded well to me, both when I was a peer and an employer, and that kind of pushed my confidence up. It made me feel more self-assured that I had made some good decisions. I think whatever business you're in, you need a combination of skill, determination, and luck in some form. And that's kind of how it came together for me so far. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a ton of sense, man. And, you mentioned the 100-hour week, so you go get a Series 7, you get an investment banking or something. You're certainly doing the same for a while. Yes. But you wind up, you wind up in a position where, like you said, it looks good, it sounds good, maybe you're making some good money, but you're also at the good gosh, you never know when the economy tanks or something. The next day you're out of work, and whereas now you're in a situation where it's interesting. Like it's almost like early in those careers, you have it's almost like an inverted X curve, right? So you start out in something like that, your risk is really low early in your career, but the further you go, the more you make, the higher you rise. It's almost like you have more risk that you're expendable if something changes. Whereas what you did is you take a lot of risk early on, but as you guys grow and you add restaurants and you build your business, you're taking on less and less risk over time. You're diversifying. And when you wake up, in your mid-40s in 15 years or so, not that you don't have any risk, but you certainly have lowered your risk profile considerably.
Right.
Whereas a peer at the same age, in a professional career may have a much higher risk profile. So,
yeah, that makes sense. It requires a lot of vision, and Mark and I are a good team, and there's things that he and I see, a lot of things that we see the same, and there's things that we don't. So I think for us, for our group, and for us as the leaders of it, having communication between us first and foremost, be really clear. We have a very close personal relationship, which is a benefit, but it's not if you don't speak openly with each other all the time. So that's a balance that we run, and we run pretty well. But everybody has to be pulling in the same direction. And when I say everybody, I don't mean the two guys that sign the check. I mean everybody. So if you don't have the kind of leadership where you can, I think pulling your staff with you and the people that work with you instead of pushing them is a much better strategy. And the only way I know how to do that, or I've seen people do it well, is to be really hands-on and get involved. So, like you're saying, the more infrastructure that we build, the less I am committed. I really can't be committed to, hourly positions right now, but I can do them. And if I'm in the restaurant on a Friday night, and I'm there to help with the managing, then I'm busting tables or making pizzas and doing the same things that I expect the managers or anybody else to do, because everyone I've worked for that doesn't act that way is not worth working for. That's one black and white observation I've had throughout my career. And I think Mark and I see that the same way, and I think it's helping us, and the more that we build, you're right, it does lower our risk, but, I don't think it's as simple as, if I just keep working hard, then all the results will happen. I think that's the biggest part of it. But at least for us, while we're kind of in the infancy of building this group, having clear-cut goals and clear communication and the discipline to follow that plan is probably the biggest part, because that's how you stop the inevitable adversities and the bad luck and the things that come up. There's really no way past those besides keeping your frame of mind right and working relentlessly at it. So far, I don't want to sound too preachy. We're still pretty early on in this thing, but that's working real well for us.
Oh, for sure. No, and you don't. And it's a tough road no matter what. But yeah, I like that. Clear goals, good communication, discipline's for sure key, especially in a business like yours where it's just, every day is something new. Different fires to put out, different challenges, different problems to solve, and things like that. So you've got to have that rigor and that discipline is huge. And then, and you guys, I know, it's interesting because when you have a partnership, it's you're not going to see eye to eye on everything, but having those sort of broad, high-level goals, directional goals is so key. What do y'all do? Like, how do you resolve when you have, when differences of opinion on an important issue? Like, what's been your process? Is it mainly
Well, that's a great
communication?
question. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there has to be some compromise, and we have the communication pretty well structured in the organization now. There's an owners meeting early on Monday, and there's management meetings that follow that, and it kind of lets the goals and the objectives flow through the channels that they're supposed to, so that everyone that's supposed to have an opinion on something gets to voice it before it goes to the next round of discussion. As far as Mark and I go, or even with our managers or some of the other operators, I guess I'll talk from the partner perspective. I know that he's capable. He knows that I am, and I know that he wants us to do well, and he knows that I want the same thing. So with him particularly, because he's my business partner, we're all working in the same direction. Here's the example I could give you. If you go into any restaurant, you take a dry storage closet that's out of whack, you can have pretty much anybody in that building reorganize it so it'll look nice. I could do it. The manager could do it. A busser could do it. It doesn't really matter. It'll look great, but it'll look different every way that somebody does it. You know what I'm saying? And so we get plenty of those scenarios. He and I both have management skills, cooking skills, etc. But a lot of times you really just need one answer, and it's not a big deal which person or what place it comes from. It just needs to get resolved. And if you really are both trying to fight to put an opinion on that kind of example, that's really more about you. Sometimes there's some pride and narcissism that's associated with that. Neither of us really make time for those things. So, we've delegated well with each other who's responsible for what areas more, but it lets us both touch all areas, if that makes sense. So,
yeah,
I think clear communication is good, and I think not having to have your 2 cents put in. We're both pretty take charge kind of guys, but we've got a good flow for when it's time for one guy to go, and at the end of the day, you remember we're having a lot of success, and we're both pulling in the same direction. So if there's some kind of problem, most of the successful people I've looked up to and try to emulate, they keep positivity at the forefront. And instead of saying, well, this is bad for this reason, they say, well, this is how we're going to make this good for this reason. And if you've got people that are all thinking that way, there's not a lot of stuff that can really slow you down drastically. So anything, the communication is a big part of it. And, keeping the perspective that as long as we're all pulling in the same direction, it's okay if we're pulling a little bit differently here or there, as long as the big project and the big vision is headed the same way.
Who are some of the people that you admire and emulate that you mentioned?
Say that again?
You mentioned people that you admire and emulate, who are some of those folks?
Well, my dad is the one that I first talked about management stuff with. My dad was an executive for many years and was an entrepreneur as well. And, he's managed a 400 or 500 person division before. So he's probably been my first resource for, the kind of nitty gritty interpersonal management stuff. And I like to read a lot. I think that's good for me. I read a lot of Stephen Covey and John Maxwell, and some of that stuff is really dry and brutal to read. But some of the lessons that come out of it, I think that stuff is really worth emulating. And a lot of the leaders that you see in day to day, I mean, even in sports teams, I'm a big Patriots fan, so sure, that's probably not going to get great reviews for you in some of the places they listen to this. But if you look at that organization as a whole, regardless of your fandom, they seem to be good at solving problems and dealing with adversities and just keeping the ship moving in the same direction.
Agreed.
And with all the great athletes, the guys like the Michael Jordans or the Tom Bradys or Tiger Woods or all those guys, whatever side any of that you fall on, the commonality I've seen between all those people is I can do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to get out to try to do it. And when I have some success, I'm going to follow that up with more hard work. And I don't think it's a coincidence that those people do as well as they do in the things that they do. I'm sure there's a lot of luck and talent that's kind of natural and part of that, but keeping that singular perspective, having a positive outlook on what's in front of you and kind of pushing negativity aside, that sounds like philosophical kind of hogwash for some people, and for me sometimes too, but it's not. If you're direct, they're clear, and you keep focused on the positives that you have around you, you find a lot more, and you find a lot more production. And for me, being in a leadership role, as soon as my mindset shifts from that, then it shifts it for a lot of people. And now I'm really doing damage because my job is to solve problems and bring solutions and find efficiencies and really support the people that work for us, and that's something that a lot of people, I've been in that situation plenty where you really feel like you're on the bottom of that pyramid, the pyramid that you see in a management book with a CEO standing up at the top. When you're on the bottom rung of that and you feel like you're on the bottom rung of that, I just don't think that's a good way to work. And that's part of life sometimes. And it's on everybody to move themselves into other parts of the pyramid, so to speak. But Mark and I like to think hypothetically that we kind of flip that around. I mean, I don't cook food very much anymore. I'm not the server at your table almost ever. There's a lot of really good people that work for us that do that stuff day to day. So my job more so now is to make sure that those people have the tools and the resources and the physical support, the emotional support, all the things that they need to feel good about the job that they're doing, to make the money they deserve to make doing it. That's why I say people is really my business now. And that's working well for us. And we have really good people, and I think that's something you'd expect somebody in this interview to say, but I'll say again that we have really good people in all the locations. So we have the luxury of saying, all right, now we have this great stuff and this great infrastructure. So how do we keep it? And how do we keep our business levels high? That's a much better situation than how do we increase our business levels and find some good staff. And, so being positive, being grateful, and trying to move things in that direction, I think is the key to all that.
Yeah, for sure, man. And it's interesting because you talk about, some of those things can be dry or whatever, some of the like Stephen Covey and so forth. But the one thing you're doing, at least I believe, because I do the same, is by reading a lot of that, you're kind of wiring your brain. Like whatever you're putting in there is, there's inputs and outputs, and if you're reading that a lot, thinking that way a lot, you're going to naturally act that way more. And of course, then the folks around you do as well. But it's really healthy. I think it's great that you're dialed into a lot of that stuff. I'm into the same. I know actually Mark and I were talking about. Do you listen to podcasts? Because I know he was mentioning he listens to the Jocko podcast.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
yeah.
I've been big on Joe Rogan lately. I like that.
Yeah.
I like some of what he has to say.
Yeah, Joe Rogan for sure. Yeah, he's got like probably the most popular podcast I think going. But yeah, and I just mentioned that because I know Jocko has this thing about discipline equals freedom, and he's really big into that. But for those listening that didn't listen to Mark and I yet, it's just Jocko Willink has a good podcast. He's a former Navy SEAL and he does business consulting now and talks a lot about the value of discipline. But
so it's funny you bring him up because I actually have his book Extreme Ownership, and
I
was talking to somebody that works with us the other day, and I'm saying, it was kind of a coaching session, and I'm talking about, as your role grows, what my recent experience especially has shown me is that it's really not your responsibilities or your title that grow. It's your character that has to change, and your character has to match the role that you're in. And if your role is to lead the organization or lead the sports team or whatever it is, you have to have the character that's associated with that, because you can't fake that, and I think that a lot of that material we're talking about, it relates to that, because you can read some really cool stuff that a guy like Stephen Covey writes, and it's really valuable. But in my experience, almost none of that stuff is you read it and now you're an excellent communicator, or you read it and you really understand interpersonal interaction better. I mean, it's more like you read it and you get some really good ideas, and then you have to change a behavior in yourself. And so if you just read the book and put it aside, your benefits are pretty limited. If you read it and say, okay, every morning now at 8 o'clock, I'm going to sit at my desk and I'm going to write out the objectives for what I'm going to do today and how it relates to my long-term goals. Every day I'm going to do that. And when the alarm goes off at 7:40 and you're tired, and you're up all night with your kids or whatever it is, that is the moment that defines it. Do you still get out of bed and put some coffee on and set that objective and keep your discipline in check for what you said you were going to do? That's the only way to change behaviors. And I have a lot of them to change. I still have a lot of work to do on it. And I found that if I don't sit and really set a course of action, then even that really powerful material doesn't really do anything. It's all about the follow through that comes from it. And it's funny you bring up that book, because I know some people, including Mark, that have read it. And I've been reading this World War II book, which is more like a fun reading thing for me lately. And that book is just staring at me. It's on my nightstand, and I know once I get into it, I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to sit up in bed for a half hour, an hour, staring at the ceiling, and my mind's going to spin. And there's going to be some stuff that comes out of it, and I'm excited for that. But I kind of laugh to myself when you say that, because the book is basically taunting me on my nightstand right now, because I know it's going to make my mind kind of go in a different direction, in a positive way, most likely. But I think how you use some of that material is as important as what's written in it.
Totally. And it takes a lot of practice. It takes the discipline to put it to work and do it every day, for sure. Well, tell me about so tell me about your people. Why you've got great people there. How do you find them? How do you keep them?
Well, I think it's kind of with the 4 big restaurants in the deli. There's a lot of different ways they've come to us. Some of us is taking over restaurants and having a lot of people that are already in the building. Some of it is my restaurant manager at one of our locations in Wesley, Vitrano's, is a friend of mine that I worked with behind a bar 10 years ago. A guy I trust very much, that I've got a lot of respect for, and have a personal relationship. And I asked him to leave his position and come to Wesley to do this with me. And he is a huge piece of what we're doing now. So I think it kind of comes from everywhere. It feels to me like it's getting harder to find people with a job post and a lot of resumes set. And, I think it's getting more difficult in our business, especially for back of the house positions. Those are hard jobs. And traditionally, you come in, especially to a kitchen, regardless of your schooling, if you're in your early 20s or younger, you come in and you wash dishes for a year and you make minimum wage. And it's a tough environment around guys that are pretty intimidating and girls that know a lot more than you. I mean, that environment doesn't really discriminate, and you pay your dues. And after a year, then you make salads. I mean, that was kind of the old path. And I don't think a lot of kids are willing to do that anymore. I think there are a lot of good people out there, but there seems to be more of a movement now where I went to culinary school and I'm here for a sous chef job. It's like, okay, well, if you haven't run a kitchen before or written a menu before, then you really can't be a sous chef, because you haven't actually earned any skill set for that position, because you don't get that in school, And so I think to answer your question, people come from all different places. We get them from referrals. We get people that I've met and given business cards to when I'm out and about in town. So it's not really one particular source where they come from. What I know now is that when you find them, you keep them. And usually the people that you have that are good, that are in town, that have been working for a while, they usually are the best source for new employees when you need them, in our experience. But I don't think there's one magic formula for that.
No, there isn't. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, about culinary school, and I almost wish, it's like, I wish the schools would teach these folks. And I think this is a gap, because I hear this a lot, Tyler, is they come in and say, I want to be sous chef. But, what I've found is everybody I know that says they started from the bottom, even if they went to culinary school, if they had the humility and they checked their ego at the door and they started at the bottom, and don't, you can't be myopic, because what happens is you wind up learning so much more about the business and how it works and every aspect of it. So while you may start lower, you have the potential to rise a lot higher because of that.
Right.
I mean, I've seen that
Absolutely.
time and again, and it's hard for people to realize, I think. But gosh, if you've gone to culinary school, you've made that commitment of your time, of your money, and you have, a longer term vision than what's going to happen over the next 12 months, then that slight, what you may call step back early on, is actually going to propel you forward. If you are willing to put your butt into it, you wind up, 10, 15 years, you'll be like, thank goodness I started at the bottom. I mean, and I hear people tell me that all the time that did that path, that are real successful.
I think that if a lot of people in our parents' generation listen to this conversation, I think their reaction is, that's not an exceptional thing. That's how it works. That's how life
that's
is.
Right. That's right.
That used to be more the norm. And so I think it's kind of a generational thing that it can be different. And, it's not that, culinary school, or in my case, it was business school, that stuff is very important. There is a very distinct role for culinary school in our industry, and for business school for people that want to run businesses. But I kind of found my footing in my career and started finding some success later than a lot of the people that I went to Babson with. That's what it felt like to me, or feels like to me. So it's not, there is no easy script and there's no easy ways around it. And on top of that, I think if you don't work all of the positions, at least in the restaurant business, if you haven't been the busser and had 4 servers asking you for stuff and a table that needs food packed up and a manager that's irate about something that got missed, if you haven't been in those scenarios, and it's hard to do a good job managing those people because you don't really know what it's like to be in their shoes. And it sounds so simple. And if you went to a fancy business school or you went to CIA, then you must understand that, but you don't. I mean, they're not related at all. I think that applies to all of the positions in the restaurant. That dynamic of having a new-faced general manager with no culinary experience in a restaurant. I've seen a lot of scenarios where that doesn't go well. That might just be my own personal experience, but if the new person in the building also doesn't know what it's like to sweat and work on the line for a 12-hour shift and have the pressure of that ticket machine going off and a reputation at stake, there's really no way you can understand that unless you do that stuff. And if you don't understand it, I don't really think it's easy to, or even feasible to manage the people that do it day to day. So I think paying dues is a big part of it. I don't think that's something unique to our business. I'm sure that it's not, but I think that people are less willing these days, at least from my experience, they're a little less willing to pay them. And, you have to if you really want to move forward. There's no kid that's born that's an outstanding athlete that just starts in the NFL. It doesn't work that way. You need luck and pay your dues, and you need years of practice, relentless training, and more luck. It's just that way for everybody. You got to pay your dues. So
yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it,
yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
What I don't want to keep you much longer because I know you're real busy, but I do want to ask you this: what have you learned in the business over the years that you would, things that have surprised you maybe about the business that you didn't really expect, before you got into it?
Things that surprised me, kind of how big our world is. I guess that'd be my first answer. I think part of the reason that I was signed up for my Series 7 was because I just thought there was more potential there for growth, for money, for career stature, for all the things that a young, impetuous 20-something-year-old cares about. That seemed like a bigger avenue. And being a business owner and doing what I'm doing now, I've realized that I really am the determining factor in kind of where this can go and what it can be. And, that's the position that I want to be in. I'm not sure everybody's comfortable with that and comfortable with that kind of pressure, but I am. And the guy that I work closely with is, and most of the people that work for us are. So, there's really no limits. You're asking me about our industry, but I feel like that's kind of a life lesson that maybe I'm just talking about because it's something that's more recent in my learning curve. There really aren't any limits. There's just what you limit your mind and your direction to. So, when I say be surprised, I guess I just didn't realize how much potential there was for personal and professional growth in our industry.
Right.
I didn't see that. And when you're young and you're a busboy at a local restaurant, it's kind of impossible to see that. You have to deliberately look out for new avenues and experience new things and work in new places. But, there's a lot that we can do. There's a tremendous amount of potential for what we're working on. And I didn't know that even 5 or 6 years ago. I don't think I could see that was what was possible. So that's probably my first reaction to that question.
No, that's great. I love it. Well, look, what you guys are doing is you're building, you're building a small business, a local business that's providing jobs for people in your community, that's investing in the community. These things are really powerful forces. And I really believe this. And you're also giving, because you're growing this business and will continue to, you're providing a great opportunity for people that maybe they don't want to own their own, maybe they don't want all that pressure, but they want to be a part of a thriving business and have opportunities to grow in their career, maybe not call the shots, but, help execute the shots. And you're really giving great opportunities for people that, maybe don't want the desk job, the 9 to 5. They don't want the the suit and tie. They,
Right.
they like to move around. They like to be around people. I mean, this is a great thing. But then an opportunity to maybe not go work for a giant chain and be, somewhere in the middle of that organization forever. But
Right.
I mean, work directly for owners that you get to know and you learn from and grow with the
Yeah.
business. And as the business grows, your opportunities grow. I mean, I just think it's a great opportunity. I have 3 kids, and I really hope that all 3 of them will at least spend, a couple, 2, 3 years working in restaurants before they figure out what they're going to do. Because I think there's so much value that even if it's not for you for your career, learning to operate under fire around, figuratively speaking, but around a lot of other teammates that are working hard, customers that have high expectations and stuff. I mean, there's so many skill sets you learn, and if you can do that and do it well, then that translates to lots of other things for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I agree with you 100%. I have a 14-month-old son, so my thinking about it, I don't know if it's too relevant for his career path yet, but I sure think a lot more about what I want to teach him and how I want him to see the world. So I think that quantifies out well. And you said it well, that for me and for my business partner, Mark, like, it's really not about us as much. I mean, the direction is, but we need everyone to grow with us. I need all these guys, like I mentioned, my manager and my friend Russ, and there's more than one Russ in our organization, and there's a lot of great people that might not have authoritative titles that are working for us that are on a career path and want to grow. And that's really our biggest job now, is to give these people the things that they need and the rewards that they deserve and the tools that they need to grow with us. And in some of their cases, that should mean being a partner in a new location and having, their earning potential go beyond what they thought it would be. I mean, that seems like the pretty ideal reward to working really hard, in my opinion. And that's the reward that I expect to come out of it. So it really comes all full circle to what we first talked about here, because those people and how we can move all of us forward is the key. And I've worked for people that were really good at that and really good at that mindset. And I've worked for people that were way up on the chain and completely forgot about that mindset. And the results in each situation speak very clearly for themselves. So, I think keeping focused on our people and the opportunities that we can present to them, and remembering that they are all of our opportunities and not just Tyler and Mark's. I think that's a very important part of our lives right now. And so far, so good, I think, but we got a lot of work to do.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Well, first of all, congrats. I know 14 months. So so you've got one kid?
Yeah, that's my first son, my wife, Jackie. And I should really mention that you're part of the dynamic that we haven't touched on is, like some other careers, restaurants can be real hard on that. And I'm very lucky that I have a very supportive wife, and she kind of makes this stuff possible for us with how she helps with her. She doesn't help. She runs the family. Yeah. I like to say it like that, but she's the boss. And, having my son around has been as wonderful a thing as I could have imagined. But it definitely changes your perspective. I know having a few kids, you definitely understand that it certainly changes the way you think about things, the way you prioritize things, and trying to make sure that both he and my wife have the things they need is been my biggest motivator for some time now. So it certainly changes things for me in a positive way. Like I said, I think when it comes to building business and being an entrepreneur, you really need to quantify out what you're willing to give and what the people you care about most are willing to give to that too, because it's not easy. They said my wife and I have very good communication about this stuff, and she's been extremely supportive. And fortunately, we were lucky enough that we could do some planning, with our family life and with our son, that he wasn't with us when I was doing those 100-hour weeks. But we're also run the risk that could be my schedule again. If something goes wrong, it's still possible. We're not far enough removed.
Right.
So you really both need to be on the same page with those things. And I'm fortunate to have that situation, but I don't think it's that way for everybody. So, like in anything, you really have to quantify out the risks and the repercussions all the way across the board. And I think starting with your family is usually a pretty good place to go with that.
No, for sure, and it's great. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people get into it and they don't realize that, and that can be that can be challenging. So you have to know what you're getting into, especially if you're young and planning a family. It's
hard.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. But it'll be great too because your son will grow up, and if you have other kids, they'll grow up around a dad who runs a business and learn a ton, and hopefully they'll stay out of that trap of like go to the best school, get the best job, work the hard, like. I'm dealing with that right now. My daughter's in 9th grade. She's already worried about what college she's got. I'm like, dude, 9th grade? I didn't even think about. What are you talking about? I'm like,
yeah,
who cares? But
that whole dynamic is changing too. But
yeah, they're a lot more anxious these days. Unfortunately, the kids are. I think they're exposed to so much so early, and it's tough, man. So, but well, listen, dude, I'm gonna let you roll. But Tyler, I really appreciate it, man. It's been a great conversation. I've learned a ton from you, and I really enjoyed it. And you
Thanks
guys
for
are.
having me. I enjoy this very much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We love serving folks like y'all, and just always appreciate the opportunity to learn from you. So, appreciate it. And as you know, man, anytime you need anything, just give me a shout.
Thanks very much. Well, we appreciate you, and we appreciate what ScheduleFly is doing for the infrastructure that we need across the board. It's helping us a lot. So
I hear you,
it's
man.
a good relationship with us, and I appreciate the time.
You bet, man. Have a good one.
All right. Be well.
See you.